It's the Packet Thrower! Welcome to the channel! Hello and welcome to the first video in mastering Cisco's CML. This series is going to explore Cisco's network emulation solution similar to GNS3 or Eve. And we're going to start out by doing the basics. So I'm going to download Cisco's CML, install it as a VM, and then we'll do some tweaks to get it up and running. Then future videos will dive more into the weeds. So first things first, this is what you get when you buy CML. There are actually two versions that I have. There is the personal version, and this allows you to have up to 20 running Cisco nodes. And then they just came out with the Personal Plus edition, and this takes you up to 40 nodes. So you can see here that this is an annual price of $199 American if you're doing personal, and the Personal Plus is $349 there. So I'd only really recommend this if you're doing more CCIE studies or larger topologies. So to download the binaries, I can click on either version. I will go ahead and click on the personal because that's what I'm going to be installing. On the download page, we have several files available to us. The main one that we want is the OVA. This is the actual solution. And also we want the reference platform ISO. This stores all the images that Cisco CML uses, such as the routers and the switches and the Linux servers and such. There is also an ISO option if we want to install this on a bare metal server, and there's also an upgrade option, but we're not going to bother with that. If you want, you can also download the older 2.0 files there. For the most part, you wouldn't need to do this. However, Cisco seems to have made a mistake in the newer reference image there because the IOSV doesn't have any crypto functionality. So you can just go ahead and download the older image to use that if that's important to your labs there, but otherwise you can just use the CSR 1000V for everything. And lastly, if you're entitled, you can also download the older viral product there, but there's really no reason to use that at this juncture. So this is my VMware workstation, and I've just went ahead and opened up the OVA. So I'm just going to rename this to be something more suiting my lab. I'm just going to call this CML3 because it is in my home network, and then 1 because it's the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and import this. And then just because I can, I'm going to upgrade the template to the latest version there, just so we have all the bells and whistles. And then we just need to edit a few things here. So because I'm actually going to use this, I want to raise the memory there, so keep that in mind. So because CML is going to be running a bunch of network devices, we need to raise the memory if we're going to have a meaningful lab. So in my case, I'm going to raise this up to 32 gigs because I have a lot of RAM. And I'm going to raise the CPU to 16. Now you could certainly get away with much lower resources, but if you want to have bigger labs, then obviously more resources is better. It is worth pointing out that virtualization is enabled for the VM, and the reason for that is that CML uses nested virtualization to actually run its network devices. So if your CPU doesn't support this, you won't be able to use this product. The next thing to do is to raise the disk storage because I like to add a bunch of third-party VMs. So I'm going to go expand, and I'm just going to raise this to 400 gigs. Now because of the way VMware Workstation is configured, it is going to do fin provisioning. So it's only going to use the storage as it needs it there, so there's no harm in adding 500 gigs there if you don't actually have 500 gigs. You just got to keep an eye on it to make sure you're not going to eat up all the space on your drive. And then the last thing we need to do is actually mount that reference ISO. So we're just going to go connected and power on, and then pick the ISO image, which is this guy here. And then I'm going to go, okay, I'm fine with the network adapter being bridged. So go ahead and start this up. Alright, so here is our fancy install screen. So we're just going to click through. It's not going to ask us anything too crazy here, so we're just going to be agreeable. Then the first choice we need to make is just add a username and password for the sysadmin. This account is used for actually doing system administration stuff. So this is when you SSH or console into the actual CML server, or when you use the Cockpit utility that we'll talk about in a minute. It says my password's not strong, but it's good enough for a lab. And then we also need a web user. So we're just going to go ahead and add this in. And yes, it is strong enough. Alright, so I'm going to set static IP, and I'm going to use .5 in my environment. And test lab is my domain. So we're just going to go ahead and confirm. So in a second here it's going to finish, and then it's going to tell us that we use Cockpit for most of our other administration. So we'll just go ahead and click OK. And we can see here is the Cockpit URL, which is where we can do web administration for the OS side of the solution. So this is Cockpit. This is CentOS technology for web administration of Linux. So we're going to sign up the sysadmin. And from here we can do some CML specific things, such as restart services, do a factory reset, do upgrades and stuff. We'll talk about all that later on deeper in the series. We can also do things like see an overview of the system performance. We can check logs. We can see how much hard drive space we have. So we can see here that because I raised the storage to 400 gig, we have this much left. We can also see that the reference ISO is mounted. And then we can do things like adjust the networking if we want to. We can add accounts. So basic standard Linux stuff. We can see the services and restart them. The most useful thing from this point on, though, is the terminal. And this is going to dump us directly into the command line for Linux. Before I do that, though, a quick word about software updates. Do not use this because CML is considered an appliance, and the Cockpit side is actually talking about updating the Linux subsystem there, so you can end up breaking your CML if you do too many updates on the OS side. But anyway, back to terminal. This dumps us into the CLI of the Linux host. We can customize it a little bit if we want to, so if you want to have a slightly different palette, you can. Black is fine for me. And we're just going to do a couple customizations. The first thing I like to do is get rid of the reference ISO, because we have to have that ISO mounted if we're running simulations there. That gets annoying, especially if you're doing ESX. So Cisco provides a script that will copy the ISOs directly over to the CML system, and then we don't need to have that ISO mounted anymore. So I can do that by going to user local bin, and then they have this handy script here. So I'm just going to say sudo and enter in my sudo password. And this is going to go ahead and copy all the images over. This will take a minute, so I'm just going to pause it here. But when we're done, we won't need to use the ISO from this point forward. So at this point, CML is running, and we have our images copied over. But I want to show you one other thing. So I'm just going to log into CML itself a little bit early. And if we go to nodes and images, say for example I wanted to edit the IOSV because I mentioned the crypto isn't included in the latest image for whatever reason. We can see that everything is considered a read-only definition, which is a little bit annoying. So we're just going to fix that. And we're going to do that by having a look at the YAML files that are included. So we're just going to say find, and we'll just say ASAV YAML. So we can see that the YAML file is in 3 different places, and if we actually read this, we can see near the bottom that read-only is set to true, which is stopping us from being able to edit the files, which I personally find annoying, but Cisco does it just so you don't mess up the main images. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to run a little... So what we're going to do is we're just going to use sed to correct that for us. So I'm just going to say sudo. I'm going to find everything. And we're going to set the type to file. I'm going to search for any YAML file, and I don't want to see any errors from this. Then I'm going to use xargs. Make that a bit bigger. Then we're going to use xargs to run sed on the results. We're just going to say if read only is true, we're going to change to be read only false. So we're going to go ahead and, oh, I see my problem. Got to give that a name. There we go. There, that looks better. So now, if we look at this guy again, we can see that read only is now false. And yes, my stylus is packed up because I'm moving there, so highlighting things is a bit more difficult than usual, but we'll live through this. It'll be fine. Alright, so now that's done, there's just one last thing I want to do. That is, if we want to SSH into CML, you would think we just go to the address there, but that actually gives us access to a different functionality. So instead what we want to do is we want to go to the SSH config, and we can see that it is allowed for port 1122. And this is how we actually access the CML system rather than the terminal server is what you get when you go to the SSH normally. So we're just going to enable this. And then I'm just going to say sudo systemctl enable sshd, and then we're going to start it. And now if I create a new session for my CML, but change this to 1122, I can now log in with the sysadmin. I'll show you later, but if we go to the regular SSH port, this is actually a console server which we'll use when we actually do this error, and this lets us actually connect to network devices for an SSH session if we want to. But anyway, now that's done, just to make our changes kick in, I'm just going to go ahead and reboot. As luck would have it, it took us to the last page I was looking at there, so we can see that this is now editable. Before it said read only. So we can adjust this out if we want to. So since we can edit, let's go ahead and add the legacy IOSV image there, just so we have the full functionality. Well, Cisco works out whatever they're messed up there. So I went ahead and downloaded the older reference image. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say create a new image definition. We're going to manage the uploads. And then we're going to go ahead and upload the image. So under base images, this will be IOSV. And we're just going to go ahead and select this. We'll go upload. And I'm going to copy this because I'm going to forget it. And I'm going to say create new image definition. We're going to say IOSV 15A3. And then we'll say IOSV 15.8-3. And we'll say legacy CML 2.0 image as full functionality. So a little description there, just so we know what we're doing. Then I select the one we just uploaded. And then we say that this is an IOSV in the node definitions, and we can leave everything else the same. So I'm just going to say create node definition. And update. So now if we go back, it got lost in the menu there. Alright, so we go back to IOSV. We can see we now have two available iOS images there. We have the 19 image, which is the one that just came out, and the 15.8. We'll talk about the full customization options later on when we get deeper into this. So now the last thing we need to do before we can actually use this is license. So Cisco uses smart licensing for this, but it is localized to the learning store instead of traditional smart licensing, if you're familiar with that. The learning store, and we can see we have a license option. So I am already running Personal Plus, so I'm going to install the personal option. So I'm going to say click on this token. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this to my clipboard. If I have any issues, I can also deregister any instances. So I'll just say yes, just in case anything's running there. And then if we go back to CML, we can say register, paste in my token, and go register. And we can see I'm registered now. So at this point, I can show you what we fixed. So we're going to go back to dashboard, and we're going to go add. And we're going to name this lab First Lab. So from here, what I can do is just drag an IOSV image and an IOSCE image. And we're going to say that this one is called R01. And this is going to stay as the 15.9 image. And then this guy is going to be R02. So I'm going to go ahead and select the 18 image for this guy. And then we're going to connect it by using this link here. Generate some bootstrap configuration, and then we're going to go ahead and start the lab. So what we did here, if you're new to this, is we dragged two IOSV images. These are the lightweight router nodes that CML offers. And I've connected them with a single link on gig 00. Now, if you come from Viral, this might be a little bit surprising to you there, because Viral took the first interface for its internal stuff there. That's no longer necessary with CML. And then I use the Generate Config button to put a standard configuration down. So let's go ahead and check the console. So the main downfall, Cisco will be your default password, by the way. Your main downfall with this image, with the 15.9 image, is that if I want to do anything crypto, there's nothing there. But if I go to the older image, the 15.8, I can do VPNs and all that fun stuff there. So I would recommend using the 15.8 going forward, and then I would assume when Cisco makes 2.2 or something like that there, they'll probably add the crypto back in, unless they want to push people to use CSRs for that there. But either way, I think it's kind of a mistake how they rolled it out right now, but we will see what they do. So the other cool benefit if you come from Viral is that you can dynamically add interfaces now. Before you had to stop the simulation, but now we can just go ahead and add as many interfaces as we feel like. If I could type, that is. So if we go ahead and no shut this, this is going to be connected. And same thing over here. So that is that. We could go ahead and check CP in a minute. No, it's not enabled. So what we'll do is just go ahead and say 10.1.2.1. And we'll go back over here and say and we'll go ahead and enable OSPF on both of these guys. Here it is. Took a sweet time there. Now the other thing that the 2.1 update gave us is they fixed the packet capture. So if we wanted to get a packet capture on that link, we could go ahead and run a packet capture. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. Now we can do this in 2.0, but the difference is we can now easily download the PCAP. So if I want to, I can just hit the download button. And there is our small packet capture. So since we're here, we can also add conditions to the link there. So if we wanted to make this a really small link, like say 5 kilobytes, we can see that it is running quite slow now. If I want to take off that condition, we can go ahead and reset that. You can see it's blazing fast now. Likewise, if we want to delete a link, we can just go ahead and choose the delete link option. We can also stop individual nodes. So if I save here and then go stop, the difference between this and the old Viral is that when you tore down everything in Viral, it was done. But now they save all the device state here. So if I start this back up, it's going to have all that configuration still, because CML is preserving the actual disk for the VM. So if I check the interfaces, we still have that interface configured. Now because of that feature, that means that we can't edit the node without wiping it. So if we go to here to simulate, there is wipe node. And when we do this, this is going to wipe out all the disk and whatnot and bring it back to a blank state. But I can edit the node now. So for example, if I go to interfaces, I can add more interfaces if I want to. Or I could straight up delete the node. So they have a little safety there just to make sure that you're not blowing away anything important. Anyway, this is just a little primer for getting CML up and running, getting it licensed, and doing some customizations. In the next video, we'll dive more into the node types and start getting more into the weeds about the kind of fun we can have. See you next time.